Well, first of all, we know that the furniture is an exercise that is playtime for Michelle and me. That's how it started. It started about us furnishing our life and extending our aesthetic into the, our surroundings and the way that we live. So we started out by creating the interior of our house in Paris, but then it ended up creating this story that we presented one time as a collection of furniture, and people responded, and it was something that Michelle um, engaged with and decided that she wanted to develop and cultivate. And all of this is a result of that cultivation of Michelle's. It's the her relationship with the artisans in Paris that she goes to visit every day,
Right.
her daily visits, her rounds. Um, and I've always said that creation is 5% inspiration and 95% execution. I mean, everybody has great ideas, but it's the execution that really makes all the difference in the world. So Michelle's execution is what makes it happen. And it's really kind of a conversation between her and me.
So who holds the pen? The first
Oh, I
pen.
hold the pen. Yeah, I definitely. And I make a few shapes, but does it matter in a way?
I
I mean,
guess
from
no.
that, it could go anywhere after
And what's
that.
the ambition about this? This is you want to reinvent a lifestyle for people?
Oh God, no, we don't even think about other people. It's only
It's
between
just for
us.
you.
It's just a part, it's a private conversation. And I sometimes think of it as the couture element of the company that we have. We have the ready to wear, but this is made out of rare materials. It's custom made, and it's artisanal, and it's rare. So I think this satisfies um, that couture element.
And would you say that in all the furniture and the fashion side of your business, are the two interconnected, and are they direct links in the inspiration?
Yeah, everything that I've always done, I've always tried to make it as honest as possible. And to do that, it has to be pretty autobiographical. And so making clothes and making furniture is kind of the same thing to me. Um, when I'm looking at this piece itself, this is very similar to something that we created for ourselves very early, like 20 years ago, that we lived with for a while. So it's very coming in here. I wouldn't call it nostalgic, but it is kind of sentimental because there's a familiarity to it and a comfort level that's nice. And but also when I'm looking at it, I'm analyzing it and criticizing it, and I'm thinking, I see Joe Colombo here. I
It's
see
true.
Luigi Colani. I see Ettore Sotsas. Um, I see Joseph Boys. Um, off the top of my head, that's what I see.
And were you digging into the past and looking at what people have done, the great masters of yesterday,
I
which
always do. I study and study and study, and everything that I do is my own personal composition of all the influences I've ever had, which is what any creator does. They take their influences and they make their own composition.
well, talking of which, all these masks are incredibly beautiful. And is there, can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Well, when I was putting my women's spring runway collection that I just showed last week, when I was putting it together, I was thinking a lot about Mexico because in my personal life, my mother was trying to decide where she wanted to spend the rest of her life because she's 87. So we were kind of considering where that's going to be. Is it going to be, because she's Mexican, is it going to be in California where she's lived for the past 60 years? Or is she going to go back to be with her family in Mexico, which she hasn't lived in Mexico for 60 years, and where would I be going to visit? Would I be going to visit her in California or in Mexico? So this was a life change, and it made us. Mexico was on our mind, and I thought I'd never really investigated my background, my Mexican background. I'd always considered myself Californian American, and so I was just kind of reminiscing about any of the Mexican influence I had had. When I was little, obviously the Aztec culture was attractive because it was so exotic and alien, and so I kind of dragged that into my collection. The other big aha moment was I went to go see a Joseph and Annie Albers show in the Venice Guggenheim, where they had, after they'd left the Bauhaus, they traveled through Mexico, studying pyramids and hieroglyphics, and that kind of influenced what they were doing at the time. And that great clash of modernism and Mexico was exactly the direction that I wanted to go into. And so these crowns are kind of like Bauhaus Aztec helmets.
And can we wear them, or it's a sculpture, or can it?
Yeah, I dare you to. Go ahead.
I
Yeah,
love
wear
one.
'em.
Can we have one? I'd love to try one. And so, what are they made of, actually?
We had them on the runway. They
Right.
are made of, I'm going to say galvanized cardboard,
Right.
but I'm not sure. I asked Michèle to do it with her in her furniture studios.
Amazing. Right. Can I wear them?
Sure. All right.
All right. How does?
We got to jam it on. Do you want me to do it for
Yeah,
you?
do it.
No, I'm not going to.
They're great. They're beautiful sculpture.
Yeah, they're pretty great.
And I believe we talked with Michèle that we might be doing a bronze cast of it.
That's where I want to go.
I think it's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be amazing. So, do you feel Mexican when you work on this, and you feel American, or do you
Well,
have
I feel
some?
like I always do. I always feel kind of like an objective alien. I always feel like I'm kind of observing things from the outside, which is fine. I like being in that position.
What kind of son are you with your mom?
I'm pretty good. I mean, she seems to like me a lot. So whatever I'm doing seems to work.
Yeah, she's proud of you.
Yeah, and I'm the only one. So but what's funny is she's a very devoted, devout Catholic, and she's very permissive when it comes to me, because she thinks I'm being creative. Like anything I do, like the most extreme things I do, she goes, "Oh, you're so crazy." Like, well, as long as you're not hurting anybody. So,
And were you creative?
yeah,
Little boy.
I was. I always got away with a lot because I was good in art class.
Right.
So that was my only power. Otherwise, I was very, very passive and shy and timid. Very timid.
Because where were you brought up, actually, as a kid?
In a pretty small conservative town in Southern California. Right. So I was a very vulnerable sissy in town, and it was rough, but it was great because I think a lot of what I do is a reaction to being judged by a small conformist town. So it did me good.
Yeah, I'm sure. And when did you know you were clear that fashion, art was your path and there was no coming back on
Well,
this?
I mean, when I was very early on, I mean, like in junior high, I guess, I started realizing I had that power, and that power fascinated people that were potential enemies. And I was allowed to develop that, and I was encouraged, and I was applauded for it. And so that I knew that was going to be what I was going to ride on for the rest of my life. I didn't know exactly how. And when after high school, I decided to go to art school. And at the time, I was kind of intimidated by the intellectual rigor I thought you had to have to be an artist. And I really didn't think I had it in me to rise to that occasion all the time. So I thought I'd go into fashion because I could do that. And now I wonder if I might have made a mistake because now I can see that the rules that I thought applied to being an artist just are not, they're not that as narrow as I thought.
And going back to furniture, is there from the great designers or artists from the past, who would you say is your biggest source of inspiration, or
Well,
the person you respect
currently,
the most?
well, I always look at Charot, and I'm always looking at Rollman. I'm always looking at Jean-Michel Frank, but I'm also looking at anthroposophic stuff from Rudolf. Is it Rudolf Steiner? That's his name, Rudolf Steiner. Um, and I'm looking at that more and more because I like how it is a kind of blend of brutalism, Art Deco, and Art Nouveau. There's kind of some Art Nouveau in that naturalness there. It's such a weird blend, and
The Roman in Shower sounds quite far from your environment.
it does. It does. Well, I mean, part of our environment, though, it's really a blend of where I would go and where Michelle would go. So, I mean, it's kind of truly collaborative in that way. Um, I think that Michelle had more of a bourgeois background than I did, and so she feels more urgency to get more barbaric, and I feel like I had a um, more a small town a small town background, and so I somewhere want to go more opulent. Um, but I mean, I think that's great. That's what makes this what it is. I mean, that combination and that balance, and that's we've both taken our influences and created something new.
And you think you're stronger, the two of you, when you get to creating all
Oh yeah,
this beautiful
I
design.
wouldn't do this by myself. I wouldn't. Yeah, totally. I mean, it's her interpretation of of suggestions of mine.
But it's still Rick Owens on the furniture, so should it be Michelle and Rick?
I don't know. That's a weird thing. I mean, we've talked about it, but when you start something as Rick Owens, and then later on in a few years, I've talked about Christo and Jean Claude. When
Yeah.
I think about that example, and when it was Christo, that was fine. We that was how it was established. And then when it became Christo and Jean Claude, um, your immediate instinct is there was a compromise made here. There was a conflict or there was a problem, and there had to be a compromise. And then there's like a tiny little layer of domesticity that kind of makes it less of um, a primal personal urge. And that disturbs me
And
personally.
and do the egos kicks in?
Between Michelle and me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm terrified of her. I just back off, and whatever she wants, I just go along with.
Oh, really?
I'm a total pussy whipped husband.
Going back to these late concepts is we need to we need to understand a bit more how it.
Originally, I was saying what I want to do, what I want to create, or what I want out of life is I want a fur on a rock next to a fire in a cave. I want what we do to be that reductive and that primal, and that satisfying. And when I was thinking about what we were doing here, I was thinking what I want is I want a womb-like environment. I want it to be, oh, actually, it was when we were walking through the Pompidou, and there was that Pinone room that is made with the laurel leaves. That, and then there's the Joseph Beuys room that's like all felt, and then there is a Carl Andre zinc floor somewhere. And I was telling Honey, I was saying, this would just be the perfect house. I mean, that Joseph Beuys room, that Pannone Laurel Leaves room, and all the floor in Carl Andre Zinc. Just that. That's all we need. So that Pannone room reminded me of it. It feels kind of like a forest glade, and I was thinking that's kind of what I want to recreate here. I want to have something. I want to have the floor go up the wall and shelter.
Do you feel safe in the glade?
Yeah, I do. I feel completely protected. It's a felt bubble, and I've always used these army blankets since I was on Hollywood Boulevard starting my collections, because there was all of the punk kids on Hollywood Boulevard wore army surplus clothes that they'd overdyed black. And they overdyed it black in this really cheap dye that we could get at the grocery store. So it always kind of, it always faded out. And that black dye had a lot of purple in it. So when you applied that purple to army green, it ended up in this kind of very dingy gray that I ended up using a lot in all of, that I still use in all of my collections. But going back to the army surplus, I would go there when I was first making clothes to buy army surplus clothes that were really cheap, and I could take them apart and then put them back together and make clothes out of them. And I used army blankets a lot. And a lot of times they'd have like some paint or some stains or something on them. And I always thought there was something very poignant about using these things that might have gone through conflict, that might have come back with someone or might have come back alone. And the fact that we are kind of reusing them and holding on to that memory, I thought was very poetic. So I've always used army blanket as my Joseph Beuys felt in my collections and in the interiors. All the interiors that we have, a lot of the flooring, a lot of the carpeting, because we usually have concrete or stone floors. So we just throw blankets on top of everything, and I use them folded to be cushions on benches. And so yeah, our life is very insulated with army blankets.
So you feel that there's a lot of memories in a way by the history of this blanket.
And this interior and this shape and this entire installation, it's based on the way Michèle and I have lived for the past 30 years. The first bedroom that we had on Hollywood Boulevard was completely insulated in army blankets and with army blanket furniture. And so this is really an expression of our personal life. You should have a few words from her. Why doesn't she replace me? All right. Okay, yes, thank you. That was a pleasure. Honey?
Honey?
I'm miking you. Wait.
Okay,
Yeah, there we go. Are you rolling this? This is cute. Okay, you guys are set.
So Michèle, we had, like Rick told us, everything about Glade. It was fascinating, and especially something I had figured out is all the history, the memories of the blanket, and trying to create this kind of cocoon things where you guys feel safe, and like Rick mentioned, like being in a womb. Do you feel the same?
Yeah, I think I've said the cocoon a lot, thinking about that. And I mean, it's not to say something so personal, but I was very impressed because of this idea, because we went to the Marc Lecky opening, and Marc Lecky is somebody with collection, and it was sort of the same feeling, you know, to be on the underpass, and us it's between this cocoon, but it's sort of on the road. So I think there is something about the time. So then I think, yeah, it's a cocoon, but it's not to be away from the time. I think it's in the time. It's the time of sort of nomad, and so you carry your thing with you. It's not like you are building your own house anymore.
And Rick mentioned that you're the most extraordinary person at making things happen and in the making and the transformation. And so you brainstorm together, but apparently are you very good with your hands? Are you a carpenter? Are you a sculptor?
No, I'm like a general of, and I find the right soldier.
You're a general.
Yeah.
You look like a general.
Like you.
I don't know.
Okay.
All right, my general.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
super.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Bon,